David writes in, David says, hey, Zach, F1 question here. Among all the midfield teams' drivers, which two drivers among midfield teams would you pair up together to make a lineup of your own midfield team? This is excluding, you cannot have Sebastian Vettel, Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen, or Alex Albon. Thank you so much. David, thank you for your question. It's funny, first of all, I would call Ferrari right now a midfield team. But I was a bit disappointed. I would have picked Charles Leclerc to be my number one driver if I could. So fair enough. I can't have Charles Leclerc. How would I build a team with only midfield drivers? What lineup would I want in Formula One? There's, you said I couldn't have 6, so that's what's 20 minus 6. 14 other drivers I could choose from. And it's funny, when I answered this question independently in my head, I ended up picking McLaren's current lineup because I really like the two drivers they have. And it's funny, McLaren's not going to have them next year. It's like, oh, well, the two drivers I would pick are not going to be teamed up again next year. Maybe it's telling, though, that I did pick McLaren and the lineup they have right now. I didn't pick McLaren because I like McLaren. I picked McLaren because I like their two drivers independently, and they bring things to the table I like. I'll explain that right now. Number one, the first guy I would choose if I was building a team is Carlos Sainz. Your number 2 driver is so important. Right now, why is Red Bull not closer to Mercedes? They have a great driver, Max Verstappen, but it's not just your star driver. You need a good number 2. Alex Albon hasn't been up to the task so far this year to join the conversation for podium finishes very often. I would pick Carlos Sainz to be my number 2 driver. I love Carlos Sainz. He's very talented. He can get you points. But the most important thing that Carlos Sainz brings to the table as a number 2 driver is that he's unselfish and he's a team player. It's such an underrated quality for your number 2 driver. Can he get points? And is he going to stay out of the way of your number 1 driver? Valtteri Bottas is the best number 2 driver on the grid right now. Right behind him, in my opinion, is Carlos Sainz. I love Carlos Sainz. If you want to pair Carlos Sainz with a star, that is how you score a lot of points. McLaren right now, I believe they're 4th in the standings. That's because of the finishes they're getting from Lando Norris doing his job and Carlos Sainz supporting behind him, getting a lot of points with the number 2 driver spot. McLaren has Carlos Sainz right now. Next year, Ferrari's going to have Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. Ferrari's going to have their star driver, talented young star Charles Leclerc, paired with Carlos Sainz, who's a dependable cleanup hitter and a guy who can score points and will not cause problems for a number 1 driver. Ferrari's got a good driver lineup moving forward, in my opinion. But since I can't pick Charles Leclerc, I cannot pick Max Verstappen. I got to pick somebody to be my number 1 headlining star driver. I want a young guy. I want someone who's an up-and-coming star. And in my opinion, if I could not have Lewis Hamilton, who I don't know if I'd pick Lewis Hamilton now anyway because he's aging. I'd want a younger guy. Like, Hamilton's incredible. Do not take that statement and go, man, you hate Lewis Hamilton. No, Lewis Hamilton, utmost respect, he's amazing. But if I'm building for the future, I want a guy in his early 20s to build around. To me, it's either Max Verstappen or Charles Leclerc. I can't have him or Lewis Hamilton or Leclerc. So the guy I choose, the young rising star I would build my team around, is Lando Norris. Lando Norris is 20 years old. He's got a cool name. It helps with marketing. You gotta factor that in a little bit, but not too much. The main thing that Lando Norris brings to the table is that he's crazy talented, and his best years are ahead of him. The only 2 people to get on a podium this year that were not from a Red Bull or a Mercedes team were Charles Leclerc and Lando Norris. That says a lot. Lando Norris is a very, very talented young driver. If I can't have Max Verstappen or I can't have Charles Leclerc, then I want Lando Norris. And the only reason why Lando Norris isn't in the same level as Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen is because, in my opinion, he's a year or 2 behind them. Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, they're a little bit older. They've been racing a little bit longer in Formula One. And I don't even know if that's accurate. I just know that they're older, and their results show me they're a little bit better right now. But if you look to the future, Lando Norris is a rising star. And I would take Lando Norris as my young superstar number 1 driver in F1. Those 3 guys, Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, and Lando Norris, they are the future of Formula One. They are rising superstars. Verstappen already is one. Leclerc already kind of is one. Lando Norris is on the rise. And I would pick Lando Norris to be my number one driver of all the midfield teams. So again, I accidentally built the McLaren current lineup right now. And ironically, I'm right. It shows in the standings, oh, wow, who's fourth in Formula One? McLaren. Because they have, other than all the top teams, they have the best driver lineup, in my opinion. Now, there are some honorable mentions I want to talk about. Esteban Ocon is a honorable mention as a number 2 driver. He's a good dude. He's got some talent. He's a team player. I like Esteban Ocon a lot. And if I couldn't have Carlos Sainz, if I couldn't have Valtteri Bottas, then my number 2 driver would, in fact, be Esteban Ocon. If Esteban Ocon had a faster car, he's a good driver. He's a guy who can score a lot of points. He's a great number 2. And if I couldn't have Lando Norris, I couldn't have Charles Leclerc or Max Verstappen as my number 1. Remember, I'm looking for a young driver who's, I believe, could have the talent to be a future superstar. Then the guy I would choose as my number 1. If I couldn't have those other drivers, I would have George Russell as my number 1. He's a great driver in a bad car. George Russell's 22 years old. He pushed the Williams car to its limit a couple times this year. And I want to see George Russell in a good car someday. It's very possible maybe George Russell is a future driver for Mercedes. Like when Valtteri Bottas is gone or Lewis Hamilton is gone, maybe George Russell's the guy who could replace one of them at Mercedes. And so George Russell's if I couldn't have the other drivers I've listed, George Russell is my honorable mention as my number 1 driver headlining my team, hopefully in a good car.